In this section, we are going to work on the fourth phase of the dissociation process, which is balance. That it is about building in your emotional system a psychic scale in which you can balance what you experienced. If I tell you this, it is because in most of the cases in which I work, people tend to mythologize their failed relationship and perceive what they experienced as something or very good, which is the reason why they do not want to dissociate of that person or relationship because they believe they were very happy at that time. And as you can see, it is what leads them to want to recover that lost past life in which they were apparently so happy. Or on the contrary, they perceive that failed relationship as something very bad, where they suffered so much, with the effect that they begin to develop a victimization complex that they then have a hard time getting rid of. That is precisely what it is so important to balance the trauma you experienced. To do this, the idea is that you can put a series of counterweights on that psychic scale that we are going to build here in contrast to the psychic weight that you are experiencing at this moment. A psychic weight is nothing more than some event or thought that in some way leads you to feel stuck, as if you were forced to remain paralyzed at some point on Earth, because that weight that you feel leads you to feel as if you were sink into the floor you are on. This is a very recurrent symptom in patients who experience some type of trauma and that causes their lives to become very difficult. Because no matter how much they try, it is very difficult for them to move, to walk in the life they lead, because as I indicated, even when they move from one place to another, even so, the weight they carry on their shoulders and on their feet persists in sinking them and making their walk both physical to the world in which they find themselves as well as emotional because of the emotions that are activated in them, and even intellectual because of the thoughts to which they are exposed become very difficult to endure because it requires them to make a great effort to get from one place to another. So for that, it is precisely that we use the technique of psychic balance, which seeks to enable you yourself to find the counterweights so that you can free yourself from all the weight that you carry because of those experiences and emotions that you cannot undo. To do this, the idea here is that you can answer a series of questions which will allow you to objectively see the way in which your relationship occurred, which is what I do with my clients in my practice. For which we are also going to assign numbers to everything you have experienced. This is what will allow you to see if your relationship was as good or as bad as you yourself believed it was, with which you will regain your balance, and that will help you to see the trauma you suffered more objectively. So, I want you to first answer the following. How would you define your relationship? Like a good relationship or like a bad relationship? If I ask you this, it is precisely because when I ask this question in my consultation, at first, most people tell me that the relationship was very good and that they had no problem with that person from whom they now want to dissociate. Do you notice that this is where the psychic denial system to which you expose yourself begin to operate? Because once we start talking about this, the next question arises, which is the one I want you to actually answer. Was your relationship as good or as bad as you thought it was? If you had to put a number on your relationship from 1 to 10, with 1 being my relationship sucked, being 10, my relationship was the coolest in the world, what number would you put on your relationship? As you can see, this is the part where my clients realize the reality of their failed relationship, because those who wanted to return to that relationship become aware that in reality, their relationship was not a 10, but was actually a 5, or maybe it's a 6, or maybe it's a 4. Therefore, the question arises, why would you want to go back to a relationship as mediocre as the one you had? I am even going to tell you more. There are people who, through this question of balance, realize that the relationship was not even a 10, but on the contrary, it was a 2 or even a 1. This completely demystifies what they believed about the relationship, which is what leads me to ask you the following. If your relationship wasn't as good as you thought, why do you suffer so much for something that wasn't as special as you apparently thought it was? I am sure that with just these questions, you are already beginning to notice how your psychic scale is slowly beginning to balance. Because through subliminal induction to these questions, I am precisely building emotional counterweights so that you can regain your balance. That is the objective of all this procedure. Therefore, the following question arises. Are you suffering as much as you think? If you could tell me this with numbers, what is your level of suffering due to that failed relationship? What number would you give due to your suffering? Being 1, I do not suffer at all. Being 10, I suffer mortal pain. Here again, you will realize that your suffering is close to a 5. There are people who tell me I suffer from a 7. And that's why I asked you the previous questions, so that you yourself would realize that there was no point in suffering for something that, after all, wasn't so special to you. If you notice, with this we are breaking the psychic spell to which you subjected to yourself. You think you suffer a lot because you have developed a victimization complex with which we are breaking here. Based on this, the following question arises. Was the person you were with good for you? When I ask this question, there are people who continue to deceive themselves and tell me yes. But there are others who immediately tell me that after thinking about it, and after all these questions that I am asking them, they realize that the partner they want that come back wasn't as good as they thought. So, as in the previous cases, I want you to give a number to that person from whom you want to dissociate yourself. Being 1, he was a very bad person to me. Being 10, he was the best person I could be with. And surely, here the same effect will occur again, as in the previous cases. It is possible that you will notice that that person scored a 5 or a 4 or a 6. That is again, he was neither very good for you nor very bad. With which we balance everything again. You were not in an ideal relationship with the perfect partner for you, nor were you in a hellish relationship with a person who transformed you into a victim. That is, of course, unless your partner at the time subjected you to psychological or even physical abuse, which would raise the question, why do you want to go to get back with someone who hurt you so much? We could continue down this path, asking a series of other questions so that you can restore your balance, but with this that I have asked you so far, I am sure that you have partially recovered your dissociative balance. Because with this, you will be able to see your failed relationship with greater objectivity, which is the purpose of this part of the process that we are working on here. In the next section, we are going to work on the topic of psychic perspective, which is the next stage of your dissociation process. I see you there.